Good morrow, everyone. Sorry. I guess in a sense I'm late. It's like 1 now. I had to go do laundry before this. I literally, the second I got home, I just threw everything together. I'm going to be doing art today. At the community, pick out a picture that I'm going to color. We're going to spin the wheel to figure out what colors I use while listening to spooky stories. Who's ready for that? I know I am. Alright, hang on. Make sure everything's set up here. Put that there. Alright, hi guys. Hello everyone, and lurkers. So, I got a color wheel here. I'm going to bring it up for you to see. There we are. I put the colors myself. 5 colors to choose from. And the thing is, whatever it lands on, I can pick whatever variation of that I use. That's the bonus I give to myself. Sup, Storms? How you doing? How's your day? My back is on fire because Bear just put icy hot on it. He might put a little too much, but it feels like a good pain. Oh, the joys of getting old. Alright, let's do a spin. First color is going to be red. We got a red. I should write this down. I don't have a pen. Hang on. You know what? I'll put it in chat. Getting old isn't too bad. I mean, you learn to deal with the pain. You learn to work out more, to stretch more. And you learn your limits. And you learn how to... Just because you're getting old and there's pain doesn't mean you have to stop. I ain't gonna let this stop me with back pains today. I did laundry, 3 loads. Alright, next color. Hooray, pink. Awesome. This is gonna be an interesting picture. Alright. Second color is pink. I might use like kind of more of a maroon. Well, we'll see. Alright, next color. Better be something different. Or I'm calling a reroll. We're rerolling. Nope. Okay, gray. We got gray. Where's my OBS? Okay. Great. We got a yellow. Cool. That's 4. Here comes the final color. Don't let me down, wheel. Don't let me down. Give me something contrasting. Blue or green. Come on, give me a blue or green. Give me blue or green. Give me blue or green. Oh, good. I get a reroll. Come on, blue or green. It's blue. Nice. This one is blue. Alright. Now I'm gonna do away with this. I'm gonna bring up the art cam. I'm gonna start the stories while I pick the variations of the colors I want to use. First, I'm gonna kill this. Murdered. Be gone with you. Also this. Yeah, art cam on. Boom. Hi. Let's see here. Alright. Oh, Storms, can you do me a favor? How well do I sound normally? I hate to ask you because your sound settings are apparently borked. But do I sound a little low, a little high, other than the normal? High, Saturn high? Because I was tinkering with them again today, trying to get them better. trying to figure out this peak problem. So I've added a few things. Can't remember what one was, but I know one of them was a noise suppression. Your volume is good? Like how good? On lower good or higher good? By the way, Storms, from what little you can see of the camera, can you tell what shirt I'm wearing? Even out? Okay, cool. I'll be checking the VOD. So can you tell what shirt I'm wearing? Yeah, damn straight I am. I was gonna do paint today, but I didn't get back in time. I thought, well, if I got paint on this shirt, I'd be just doing Jeff proud and not ruining the shirt. Alright, let's start the stories now.
When a 13-year-old boy living on a farmstead in
Let me
Mexico
know if you can't hear
partakes in what he
the
believes
story if I need to
is
turn
a
up
harmless
any.
bit of fun with a few friends,
Alright.
he inadvertently invites something into his home which goes beyond his
Red,
understanding.
pink, gray, and yellow, blue.
Over the next few months,
Okay, what we got
things
here?
go from bad to worse as those around him try to expel the evil within.
Oh, this is tapped. This is a sad looking pen. Look at that. There's like nothing left in here. Alright, this might count as reddish, kinda, maybe more brown. Not for these particular ones, but I got plenty of pens, like a couple boxes. But I like these better because they're newer. I might use this. I wish I knew where my what is it? Like I have a little notepad that I use to test colors on, and I don't know where I put it.
The paranormal manifests in many different ways and means many different
use this one for now.
to many different people. For some, it involves ghosts and hauntings. For others, clairvoyance and other psychical gifts. For most,
that
however,
could be a decent pink.
it means absolutely nothing, and merely the mention of any bizarre experience will often draw upon the storyteller strange looks, most commonly of ridicule and disbelief. The world of the paranormal is a puzzling one to inhabit. There are those who have seen and heard things they could not explain, yet remain skeptical. There are those who have seen and heard nothing at all, yet believe implicitly. And then there are those who simply do not know, who sit on the fence and find the prospect of experiencing something paranormal far more interesting than they do terrifying or ridiculous. This tale comes by way of one such person, a young man from the state of Hidalgo in Mexico named Lucas Villa. And for him, what started out as a game, a trifling venture into what he assumed was purely imaginary, would become all too real.
Is that better?
Lucas is by now a young man of 23, leading a normal life in the city of Pachuca where he grew up.
Let me know if I need to adjust it.
He works long hours, earning a steady income, and nurtures the hope of one day settling down with his girlfriend Sophia, whom he describes as the love of his life. From the outside looking in, Lucas is a regular guy, hard-working, personable, and well-liked amongst his peers. But in truth, he bears a decade-old secret, which still troubles him during his quieter moments, and haunts his dreams to this very day. Not even the passage of time has eased this burden. For when Lucas was just 13 years old, he went through one of the most terrifying ordeals of his life. Nothing would allow him to forget the events that occurred back in the summer of 2007. At the time, he and his family lived on an old farmstead on the outskirts of town. They didn't have much in the way of livestock, just a few goats and heifers, which produced milk and cheese, and a few hens, which laid eggs daily. What they did have, however, was land, 150 hectares to be exact, and whilst the family wasn't particularly well off, they produced annual crops of wheat, corn, barley and beans, which brought in a reasonable income. Lucas spent most of his days either attending school or helping out around the farm. On those occasions when he had time to himself, he would while away the hours playing video games or hanging out with friends from the surrounding countryside, getting up to the kinds of mischief that boys their age tend to do. In reality, Lucas was a good kid. He displayed many of the traits that would define him later in life. He stuck to his studies, worked hard for his family, and was popular with his friends. But an incident in May that year would begin to turn his life upside down. At the beginning of that month, his parents came home one evening to find him and 3 of his companions gathered in the family room playing with a Ouija board. Whilst it was merely a bit of fun to him and his friends, his mother and father were Roman Catholics and were both deeply religious. They saw the act as an affront to God, and after they had asked his friends to leave, they proceeded to burn the offending article and grounded their son for 2 weeks. His pleas of ignorance fell on deaf ears. His parents were superstitious to a fault, and they were adamant that Lucas should understand the seriousness of what he had done. He could not even begin to understand the reasoning behind what he thought was an irrational punishment. During his experience with the Ouija board, a few strange things had occurred, but nothing he couldn't explain. He and his friends had heard knocking from other parts of the house, and had seen the flames on the candles flare momentarily up to a foot in height. But Lucas had put this down to coincidence, or his friends playing some very clever pranks. He just didn't share his parents' superstitions about
Hey,
the
Gargoyle,
paranormal.
what's good?
But
How
over
you
the
been?
coming months, that would profoundly
Right now I'm currently
and
trying to pick
irrevocably
colors for
change.
the picture.
The first couple of
We did
weeks
a
passed by
we
without
did a spin
incident.
to randomly pick
Lucas's
them, and now I'm
ban
trying
on
to
leaving
figure
the
out
house for
which
anything other
variations I
than
want
school
to
or
use.
toil was over,
And I'm having a hard
and
time
he was
finding
once
yellow
again
that
free
isn't
to
used
enjoy
up.
his horseplay and spending time with his friends. But in June of that year, whilst he was clearing out one of the
Gold's close
farmstead's
enough to
disused
yellow, right?
outbuildings, he found,
That could work.
lodged beneath the piles of old farming equipment, another Ouija board. To his surprise, it looked
Caught me
exactly like
early?
the one he and his
I'm
friends
late.
had
What are you
used back
talking
in
about?
May,
I ain't early.
except it was tattered
Early would
and
be
covered
like
in dust.
6 a.m.
Not wanting to incur the wrath of his parents a second time, he decided not to tell them and tossed it out with the other rubbish. Although the discovery had unnerved him, he soon forgot about it and continued with his work.
Ooh, this might be a good one.
That night, however, he awoke in
Yeah, I'm gonna
pools
use
of
this.
sweat
Alright,
and
we got 2
gasping
colors
for air.
now. I need
He
a
had
red.
the most awful dream.
What was it?
Something
A
black
red, a blue.
had been leaning over
and a
him as
grey.
he slept,
We got
getting
pink,
closer and
we got
closer
yellow,
to his
so yeah,
face,
need blue, gray,
to
and
the
red.
point he felt he was being smothered and couldn't breathe. Unfortunately for Lucas, this became a recurring nightmare, which called upon him every night for the next few weeks,
Could
and
possibly
began
go
to
with this
affect
as a
his
nice
sleep.
dark color.
During the day, he found that he was snapping at and arguing with those closest to him, but lack of sleep was not the only reason for his irritable mood. He was beginning to find items which belonged to him in other parts of the house, in places where they never should have been.
Oh, that's black.
Sometimes, these items went missing altogether and were never seen again. Other times, they returned to their original spot, even though he had searched those areas over and over. Things continued like this for some time, but it would be the events of the 22nd of June which would escalate the situation beyond his understanding. On this day, when he was in his room looking for his BB gun, he noticed an item jutting out from under his bed, which looked familiar. On closer inspection, and to his utter disbelief, it turned out to be the Ouija board from the outbuilding, which he had discarded the week before. Surprisingly, he found that he felt angered by this, and marched downstairs and confronted his parents, accusing them of playing pranks on him.
Might go
He
with this.
suspected that they had not burned the Ouija board as they had originally said, that they had planted it in the outbuilding and later under his bed for him to find, and that they were moving his belongings around the house. He even went as far to suggest that they were somehow putting ingredients in his food which gave him nightmares, all in the name of teaching him a lesson for using the Ouija board. But his parents appeared genuine when they told him in no uncertain terms that they had no idea what he was talking about, and when he stormed off, their confusion turned to deep-seated concern. Lucas had been acting out of character for the past few weeks, but this was highly irrational behaviour. He had not long turned a teenager, and at first, his mother had put this down to the fact that his hormones were probably running amok. But this revelation about him finding the Ouija board a second and third time had alarmed her. That night, she prayed for her son,
I'm gonna go with the dark
burning
gray.
incense and going from room to room,
1, 2, 3,
reciting
4, 5. I think I
prayers
got
to
everything
ward off
cool.
evil spirits. As the weeks rolled by,
This is gonna be a weird
things
kitten.
gradually got worse for Lucas. He was beginning to experience other strange things around the house whenever he was home alone. On one terrifying occasion, he was sat watching TV when he heard slow, thudding footsteps walking towards him in the hall just outside the family room. At night, he would hear knocking on
Hey,
his bedroom
Zaffy.
walls and his name being whispered, which sounded like it was coming from under his bed.
I know you can't use it because you
In
need
the
a
morning,
sub, but here you go.
He would often find strange markings and scratches on his body, and another time, he awoke in the middle of the night to see a dark figure standing in the corner of his room, unmoving.
Behold
and staring
Zaffy's
at him
creation
as he
for me.
slept.
She made the channel
He
a
kept these
tail.
things to himself, for he didn't want to concern his parents, and whilst these occurrences
Why
frightened
is my
him,
coffee already
he
cold?
resolved that he could simply try to ignore them.
Is 30 minutes gone by already?
That was, until the blackout started. The first instance of such took place in mid-July,
By the way,
when
Zaffy, how do I
Lucas awoke in
sound?
a thicket of trees
I've been
more
playing
than
with
a
my
kilometre
voice
away from the house,
with my mic again,
with his
trying to get
skin
it right.
baking in the hot afternoon sun.
Oh, I'm so gonna sneeze.
His body was tangled in foliage and covered in minor cuts and bruises. His head, however, was unscathed and resting just outside the thicket boundary. It was almost as if someone, or something, had tried to drag him through the brush into the darkness of the wood beyond, but his body had become entangled in the undergrowth. What seemed to him like just a few moments before, he had been turning over topsoil on the east side of the farm. Now, he was all the way over on the west side, and when he staggered in through the kitchen door back at the household, his shocked but visibly relieved parents asked him where he had been all
alright,
this
Zaffy.
time.
Sorry I wasn't able
More
to
than
respond.
3
I was having a
hours had
sneezing
passed.
fit. Enjoy your lurk and your
The
food.
blackouts only seemed to occur whenever he was alone. Sometimes they would last minutes, other times hours, and he would always wake in odd places or lying in
Let's see
strange
here.
positions. More often than not, items of his clothing had been removed, and he would have more marks and scratches on his skin. But the real horror would
This is going to be a
begin
very interesting cat.
when he started to wake up in the midst of torturing animals.
I guess
The
I'll make
most
him yellow and
disturbing
gray.
instance, the one that shook him to his very core, was when he came to sitting upright, holding a knife in his hands, which was speckled with blood. A baby goat from the farm was pinned between his thighs, bleating wildly, with lacerations to its hindquarters, and a look of unbridled terror in its eyes. When Lucas came to his senses and realised what he was doing, he ran. He ran across the cornfield in front of his house, onto the track leading away from the property,
I'm going to give it a
and
pink
exited
nose.
the gateway onto the main
Watch
road.
this.
He ran along highways, past people, cars and houses. He ran over more fields, and through woods, and down into creeks and across dry riverbeds, through brush and over rocks the size of vehicles. He ran until he had nothing left and collapsed, exhausted and sobbing. When authorities finally caught up with him 2 days later, he had run almost 25 miles away from his home. In the hospital, where he was being treated for dehydration and exposure, Lucas finally came clean to his mother about what had been happening. She had had no idea as to the extent of his strife. Discussing this with her husband, Hector, they reasoned that there was no such medicine for this kind of affliction, and contacted a local priest at the earliest opportunity. Father Benito Jose Carita made several visits to the Villa residence in the month of August, and determined that Lucas's body and mind was indeed playing host to a malevolent and parasitic entity. Approval was granted to perform an exorcism,
call it demon a
and at
parasite.
the beginning of September, the Villa family and several members of the church gathered around the boy in order to assist in banishing whatever it was that had taken hold of him. He was tied to his bed, not just for his own safety, but for the safety of those present, for they knew they were in for a difficult night. Lucas himself does not remember much of the ordeal. In fact, much of what he told
I
us
just
in
never
his
heard
own
it put
account
that way before.
was pieced together from only fragments of memory, and of what his mother and father told him in the years following. Of the exorcism, however, he has almost no memory at all, except for one thing. Right at the very end, when it was all over, he remembers hearing a clunk beneath the bed, and the sound of scrabbling claws across the wooden floor, and the panicked gasps of those around him as they jumped out of the way. He looked down just in time to see what he thought was the top half of a black, oily, inhuman body with no legs, hurriedly pulling itself towards the door with its spindly arms. This memory is a point of contention for Lucas, as his parents don't recall anything of that nature taking place. He is not sure whether he imagined it in his exhausted state, or whether his mother and father covered it up in order to protect the sanity of their son. Either way, he doesn't want to know. Lucas slept for almost 3 days solid after the exorcism, and seemed to return to normal. There were no more blackouts or strange happenings around the household, and that tattered Ouija board was never seen again. Ouija boards have been around in some form or another for centuries,
And are
and
sold to
although originally
kids.
marketed as a children's toy in the early
demons
20th
can
century,
get them early.
they have since taken on a far darker reputation. There are those who believe they serve as gateways to another realm, where only pain, sadness, and torment persists, and that anything that steps through that gateway is inherently malevolent. Whether you are a believer or not, many will argue that in using a Ouija board, you are marking yourself as a target for something else, something predatory, which sees your willingness to open that gateway as a desire to connect with them. Lucas is unsure of the exact details regarding such things. Although he still classes himself as an atheist, he is resolved to never again mess with anything of that nature for as long as he lives. Before Father
Do I
Benito
make
left,
the ears yellow or
he
gray?
placed an item in the palm of Lucas's hand. It wasn't a crucifix, as you might expect, or any kind of religious symbol for that matter. It was simply a small wooden disc, inscribed with the word "Proteger," or protect. Father Benito told him never to lose it, and to always keep it
I
with
thought you were
him.
lurking, Savvy.
And to this day, Lucas wears it around his neck. Not that he would ever admit to being superstitious, of course.
Yeah, the patches
But
are going to
even
definitely
now,
be gray.
There have been a couple of times when he did not take it to bed with him.
I gave it a
Instead
little
of
pink
placing
nose.
it on his bedside table, as he usually does, he has left it in his coat pocket, or sitting on the kitchen table, or hanging on the key rack next to the door. And whenever he has done this, he has had a terrible dream of a face leaning over his bed, suffocating him as he sleeps.
Seems like the parasite wants back in. In case if you're wondering, Zaffy, yes, there will be ducks today. I gotta eat at some point. Oh, by the way, I will be running solo tonight. Storms is not up to streaming, which is fine. This actually looks pretty good. I had my doubts about the colors, but this is looking nice. Hey Hex, I see you.
Bedtime stories.
Are you still streaming or are you done? Oh no, it's totally fine. You've been taking in a lot of information.
In the early
getting your
70s,
book
a
knowledge
man
on.
by the name of Michael Taylor committed one of the most gruesome murders in England's history. He was arrested shortly afterwards, and when asked why he had committed such a horrendous deed, he simply replied, "The devil made me do it."
Well, I hope you had fun. I peeked in on you every now and then when I had a moment.
One of the most terrifying prospects for any advocate of the paranormal is the possibility of being possessed by an evil or demonic entity. The age-old fear of demonic possession, especially by the devil, has lived with man for as long as anyone can remember. Early civilizations told tales of demons of the night who could seize hold of a person and force them to commit vile and cruel deeds against their will. Hebraic and Sumerian folklore spoke of Lilith, the purported first wife of Adam, who gave herself to evil spirits and visited men in their dreams to steal their essence. The Old Testament related how King Saul was invaded by demonic entities and underwent severe depression before young David cast them out, whilst Jesus Christ is said to have expelled 7 demons from Mary Magdalene as one of his many miracles. Islamic culture told tales of the jinn, a magical demon capable of granting wishes, whilst also seizing control of a person, and Hindu belief warned of rakshas, entities which could drive men to harm themselves and others. Over the course of history, we hear stories of the devil possessing humans without warning, and of the efforts to combat these demons in holy rituals called exorcisms. Yet what was once viewed as a genuine battle between good and evil has now come to be seen as hysteria, born out of primitive society's ignorance to scientific and rational explanation, and in some cases, even farce and entertainment. The wider world is largely unaware of the 1949 case of Robbie Mannheim, a Baltimore boy who was possessed by demons and underwent an excruciating exorcism, but is far more familiar with the piece of fiction it inspired, William Blatley's novel The Exorcist, and its 1973 film adaptation. Perhaps that is why the most notorious cases of such instances are lesser known, since there are times when these struggles have not always gone in our favour. One tragic example is the 1974 case of Anneliese Michel, a teenage German girl who allegedly fell victim to demonic possession and died during the exorcism, a case which loosely inspired the 2005 film The Exorcism of Emily Rose. And perhaps it is also no coincidence
Seen it, thought it was a good movie.
that in the same year, one man in England fell victim to what many feel was a clear case of demonic possession and committed one of the most gruesome crimes in English history. It was a crisp and calm autumn morning on Sunday the 6th of October 1974 in the quiet little village of Ossett near West Yorkshire in England. For the devout Anglican villagers, the highlight of the day was the regular trip to the morning mass, a traditional practice by the pious folk that had taken place there since antiquity. For one woman, however, the thought of heading out to church that morning must have been the furthest thing from her mind as she picked up the telephone to contact emergency services. Just outside her window, she watched as a tall man ran stark naked past her front gate, yelling something incoherent about Satan and covered in what she described as red paint. As she urged the operator to send an officer to the scene of the disturbance, little did she, or in fact anyone in the quiet town, realise that the biggest scandal to ever rock their conservative community was just about to unfold. 31-year-old Michael Taylor was often described by neighbours as being a gentle and kind man, a loving husband and a wonderful father of 5. He was born and lived his whole life in Ossett with his family, and although he made a modest living in a time of increasingly high unemployment in the country, he was generally a happy and affable man. Several friends even noted that they often heard laughter coming from his home, for he loved to tell jokes and often played with his children to no end. Things, however, took a sudden change in April 1974 when he suffered a back injury after falling from the rafters of a home whilst attempting repairs. Although the injury was minor, he suffered chronic back pain, causing him to resign from his occupation. As he struggled to find a new line of work, he began experiencing severe bouts of depression. In June, he eventually settled into a job as a butcher, and although it brought in a low wage, he cheerfully did his best to live a decent lifestyle. But all that appeared to change after Michael began to express discontent with his meagre salary and behaved rather coldly towards friends and co-workers. He also experienced mood swings, often becoming confrontational over minor things, a trait he had never exhibited before. His wife Christine supported him during this troubled time, but became concerned by his sudden change in behaviour and confided to neighbours that she worried over his mental state. Her worries prompted a family friend, Barbara Wardman, to talk Michael into turning to a local religious gathering, the Christian Fellowship Group, to have them help him in his time of need. Even in the early 1970s, Ossett was a very devout village, with much of the populace attending church regularly on Sundays. Wardman felt the word of God was the answer. She attributed Michael's change in mood to his religious indifference, opining that his lack of faith was leading to his employment difficulties and struggles at home. So it was with good intentions that she brought Michael to the group's meeting house on Saturday the 12th of September, and it was through her that he met the group's 21-year-old faith leader, Marie Robinson. It was a meeting that was to have massive repercussions. Claiming to be able to communicate with God, Marie Robinson easily accepted Michael into the group, and he fell almost immediately under their sway. Marie described her denomination as being a vital front line in God's battle against evil, and even claimed to possess miraculous powers, which allowed her to exorcise demons from individuals. The group also practiced speaking in tongues, prayed long hours into the night, and some reports even alleged Marie could summon the Holy Spirit during exorcisms. As her charm and favour towards Michael became more obvious, so too did his infatuation with her. Almost immediately after joining the group, he started to spend a great deal of time sequestered in private with Marie, supposedly praying for hours on end. But behind the scenes, several of her followers suspected her of engaging in a torrid affair with Michael. Some reports at the time claimed that Michael would even set out just after dinner to go to the congregation, even on nights when the group did not meet.
Do you see this?
And join Marie in prayer
What
against the full
insanity is
moon,
this?
which she believed weakened her special powers. The more time he spent in her company, the more rumours continued to run rampant that she and Michael were becoming far too inseparable for anyone's liking. Christine bravely put up with much of the gossip, but by October 1974, she too had had enough. At home, Michael's attitude towards her and the family dramatically
if I can
worsened.
find my lighter, I can fix it.
His mood swings turned violent, and only when he was around Marie did he appear to regain some of his former cheerfulness. On the evening of the 1st of October 1974, Christine joined her husband for what was to become an unforgettable night with the group. Unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. Almost as soon as she arrived, Christine immediately accused Michael of having an extramarital affair and demanded him to confess his sin before the group. Instead, he suddenly rose and began to scream wildly and, without warning, lunged out to attack Marie before everyone's eyes. Several group members helped to subdue him, but the look on his face was one of terrible rage and, as Marie later described, bestial fury. Marie started screaming in tongues and chanting "Jesus, Jesus" in an effort to calm him, and after nearly an hour of being restrained, Michael eventually succumbed. The following day, his mood had completely changed, and he claimed to remember nothing of the incident. Although wary, Marie forgave and absolved him, and reluctantly allowed him to remain in the group. In the back of her mind, however, the experience had made the young woman fear for her life, and several of the group's members closely monitored Michael to ensure he did not repeat this violent attack.
Bam! Look at that.
But his attitude at home did not change, as he continued to act aggressively towards his wife and family. Neighbours and friends noticed this and alerted the vicar of Osset. After some observation, the vicar concluded that Michael was desperately in need of divine intervention. He requested help from the Anglican Church of England for permission to perform an exorcism. For this endeavour, the church sent Anglican pastor Father Peter Vincent and Methodist minister Reverend Raymond Smith to meet with Michael, and they came to the same conclusion that an exorcism was indeed necessary. They set the date of the session for Saturday the 5th of October 1974 and would hold it at the Church of St Thames in Barnsley. They would be in for one long night. At 10 p.m, the exorcism commenced, and right away, Michael's behaviour became evidently violent, shouting in tongues and writhing about in almost inhuman convulsions. He exhibited all the commonly described signs of demonic possession: scratching, biting, spitting, and uncontrollable fits of rage. His conduct towards the two priests became so dangerous that he was forcibly tied to the floor whilst they continued to do battle with the demons inside him. By their count, Vincent and Smith claimed that at least 40 demons lay buried deep in Michael's mind,
Damn,
and each
40?
one was going to be hard to remove.
Wow.
They named the demons of carnal sin, those of blasphemy, bestiality, incest, and even masochism. For more than 8 exhausting hours,
like a
they
demon
battled
orgy in
their
his
way
head.
through his psyche, to the point of near collapse, before finally declaring most of the demons expelled the following morning. Although he appeared cured, Michael was warned by the priests that there remained 3 terrible demons still in his head, and that he had to be careful. Michael appeared thankful, and then asked if he could return home. Fathers Vincent and Smith reluctantly released him from their charge, and watched as he headed home with Christine, unaware that in just several hours'
If they left
time,
3 demons' heads,
they
that gotta
would
be
come
the
to regret
worst.
this
I feel like
decision.
it was a job not finished.
That same afternoon, just after 12 p.m, Police Constable Ian Walker responded to a phone call concerning a man creating a disturbance near the street where the Taylor residence was located. Upon arriving, he found a naked man crouched in the fetal position, giggling maniacally and covered in what he thought was red paint. Walker then recognised the man as Michael Taylor and noted a faint, odd smell coming from him. Upon closer inspection, he realised, to his horror, that he was covered not in paint, but in blood. Human blood.
He ate a guy.
Michael appeared to be in a dazed state, as though he had just awoken from some terrible dream, and when asked, he professed that he had no idea where the blood came from, but he feared he had harmed someone and worried they were dead. Walker then requested backup, and after authorities arrived on the scene, they entered the Taylor home, thoroughly unprepared for what they were about to find. In what could only be described as a scene from a horror film, the police found Christine Taylor lying dead in the living room in a pool of her own blood. They found that she had been strangled and that her face had been horribly mutilated afterwards. Her eyes had been gouged out, her tongue had been ripped from her mouth, and the flesh on her face was clawed and chunks of her skin lay scattered all around. The police also found the tattered remains of the Taylor family's poodle, having also been strangled and then mutilated in a similar fashion to Christine, with its limbs ripped out of their sockets. When the coroner took a closer look at the body, he found there was blood in Christine's esophagus and stomach, indicating she had choked on her own blood as she lay dying. It did not take long for the police to conclude that Michael had committed the deed, surmising that after killing his wife and their dog,
you should have put on headphones.
He had then removed his clothing and bathed in their blood, after which he left the house. Several neighbours and witnesses claimed he ran around screaming, chanting, "It's the blood of Satan," before eventually returning home. For his part, Michael appeared to remember nothing of murdering his wife, despite admitting the blood was surely hers, but made no challenge as they placed him under arrest.
Whoops.
Once word of the
My
gruesome
bad.
murder leaked out,
Do you want me to pick
the shocked
the next story?
townsfolk of Osset
And
found
maybe
themselves
have
at a
less
loss for
score?
words.
I'm so sorry. I
Several
didn't
of
know.
the Taylors' friends and neighbours could hardly believe someone so close
hope you're not
could
in
do
trouble.
such a thing, and as the story rocked their town, reporters began flocking to Osset to learn what
Okay.
they could of the crime. When news correspondents
All right.
learned
I
that the
don't wanna
murder
get
had
anyone in
taken
trouble or
place the day
nothing.
after Michael had undergone an exorcism,
I was thinking,
the
I think
story
Zephy's
took on
eating
an
it.
even
This
more
can't be
macabre
good.
angle. Newspapers called it the devil's work, and claimed that Mr. Taylor had been possessed by a demon and had murdered his wife at its whim. The coroner had even listed
Just
the
tell
time
him
of
I'm weird,
Christine's death
which is
to be
true.
10 a.m. that morning, a mere 2 hours after they had left St. Thames Church. Michael was sent to the Broadmoor Secure Hospital for the criminally insane to have his sanity evaluated, but whilst he was detained, several people in Osset started pointing their fingers. Many blamed the Christian Fellowship group, accusing them of being little better than a fanatical cult, which used brainwashing techniques to influence Michael's already agitated mental condition. An equal amount of criticism was aimed at Marie Robinson. Some believed she had been using the group to convince Michael he harboured demons and filled his head with worrisome thoughts. Allegations of their supposed affair disgraced her even further. But then another group came under fire as the case began its hearings: the priests, Peter Vincent and Raymond Smith. The media believed that the incomplete exorcism and their inability to completely drive out all of Michael's demons had led to Christine's untimely death. Reverend Smith's own wife, Margaret, who was present at the exorcism, had even warned that something terrible would happen to Christine once she left the church, but even then, the exhausted priests had allowed them to leave together. Journalists
Maybe that's why they left Three
criticised them
Demons,
for
because they
being
were too
inept
tired.
and felt they had used the exorcism to further warp Michael into a frenzied delirium, which resulted in the murder. As the trial began on the 17th of February 1975, prosecuting barrister Geoffrey Baker called the case so bizarre it would be rather difficult not to believe one was back in the Middle Ages. The prosecution wasted no time in presenting the gruesome evidence to the jury, stating Michael had been held against his will and forced to undergo a harrowing religious frenzy, reached near breakdown, and in his exhausted state from the exorcism was driven to kill his wife in a fit of extreme rage. The defence, in turn, stated that the guilty parties not present at the trial, the Christian Fellowship group, Marie Robinson and the priests, had merely used Michael for their own ends, experimenting on him and making him believe he harboured demons. They ventured that the exorcism was another deliberate attempt to keep him under their control. The defence attorney famously laid the blame on the cult and religion as a whole, and public opinion soon turned against the church for filling Michael's head with paranoid thoughts. The backlash from the trial made many uncomfortable with the thought of exorcisms, and the resulting public outcry forced the Anglican Church of England to act. They released an official statement that no further exorcisms would ever be conducted by any member of the church again, and to this day, that has been the case. Perhaps ironically, the prosecution's attempts to paint Michael Taylor as a neurotic, mentally unstable man at the time of the murder worked to save him. In March
Hey, Peaches, what's
1975,
good?
the jury returned a not guilty verdict by reason of insanity, meaning that Michael would not be sent to prison for his crime. Instead, he was sentenced to 2 years of medical observation at Broadmoor Hospital, to be released only upon a final evaluation of his mental state. 4 years of medical treatment would follow the trial before he was released in July 1979
you're the first because no one
to an
ever thinks to
understandably
check
wary Osset community. Granted only minor visitation rights, Michael was never able to reconnect with his children, and his mental state began to suffer drastically. In 1981, he was hospitalised for the first of what would be 4 suicide attempts, brought about by severe depression and the unenviable infamy of being the victim of
I saw
demonic
your
possession.
post, so how'd it go?
His name was back in the headlines in England when in July 2005, Michael was arrested for making unwanted sexual advances towards an underage girl. He was found guilty for this misdemeanour and once again was admitted to hospital for 3 years of psychiatric evaluation and treatment.
When will you know if
When
you
his
get the
second
dog or
trial
not?
took place, old memories of his demonic deed resurfaced.
Oh, you know what? I just
and made
realized
a new
I'm under the wrong
generation
skin.
of
I'm doing
Osset
art. I
citizens
should be under
wary
the art
of his
skin.
presence. In reviewing this case, we are left with several unanswered questions.
There we go.
What really happened that October morning in 1974? We know from reports what took place, but how could a man be driven to murder his wife in such a manner? Was it all really the result
cool.
of ongoing mental deterioration, which had
Well,
been
congrats.
brought about by fervent influence and mental conditioning by a religious cult? Or was it something far more sinister? Something unthinkable?
By the way, Patches, did
Are
you
there
see
such things as demons?
what
And
Zaffy
can
did?
they cause
What
us to
Zaffy
commit
made
such
me?
acts of barbarity? And if this is the case, who amongst us is most vulnerable? We are left with one final, haunting thought.
I wish I could
Michael
make some of the
Taylor's
animated
remaining
emotes
demons were apparently
for
never
just
excised
followers,
from
but it
him.
won't let me.
We are to question then whether they ever truly left him, or whether they are simply lying dormant, waiting to come forth once again and remind us that we might each be carrying the devil inside.
She did a great job. I showed it to Bear last night. He likes it. He approves it. You know, I know it's called bedtime stories, but I would never listen to this at bedtime. I wouldn't sleep, ever. Once they
One
approve
afternoon
my
in 1994,
property, they will
a
organize a
series
time.
of silent
Okay, cool.
911 calls from a
That's a
remote
bedtime
Texas
story,
ranch
yeah.
would result in a number of police officers descending upon the property. What they found after breaking through the front entrance would shock them to the core and leave them questioning what killed Olivia Mabel.
If I did sleep, I would definitely get nightmares, but I'd be like paranoid at every little slight bump that my cats would do. Be like, the shadows are coming to kill me. Someone answer that.
911, what is your emergency? Hello? Hello?
Apparently they took too long to pick up. been at rescue for a
The death
while.
of a
He had a
child is
sister
one
and
of
she
the
was
greatest
taken
pains
already.
any loving parent
The
could
reason he's
possibly
still
bear.
there is he doesn't
To
do
lose something
cats.
so special, which brings so much joy to one's life,
And everyone else who
would
liked
be
him
every
has
mother and
cats.
father's worst
Well,
nightmare.
maybe he was meant for
A
you.
journey far too agonizing to take, one which would
You
leave
don't want to
them
pick up the phone, it's
feeling
oozing
desolate
goo.
and alone,
Good
and on
call.
the verge of self-destruction. The tragedy of burying one's own child often results in ongoing, lifelong depression, and in many cases, suicide for those bearing the brunt of this kind of heartbreak. They end up living in a world of memories which they can no longer recreate, torturing themselves inside the walls of a prison from which they cannot escape. Back in March of 1990, this very misfortune descended upon a household located in Salina, Texas. The Footlights Ranch, a 13-acre property situated about an hour north of Dallas, was owned by Travis and Olivia Mabel. They had relocated there in 1983, shortly after Olivia had given birth to their son, Aidan. As a happily married couple, they hoped, in purchasing a larger home, to extend their small family, although during those first years, they doted heavily on their only child. On the afternoon of the 13th of March, a 7-year-old Aidan had asked his mother if he could go off and play in the sprawling grounds surrounding the ranch. She had, of course, agreed, as she did so every day, on the proviso that he was back in time for his dinner. Aidan had whooped and cheered as he set off on yet another boyhood adventure, and Olivia didn't see him for the rest of the afternoon. By 5:30 p.m. that evening, however, he had still not returned, even though his dinner was sat on the table, going cold. Both parents set out to look for him, thinking he was probably having too much fun and had simply lost track of time, but nothing could have prepared them for the reality of the situation.
They both wanted to bite the duck's head
Not
off.
too far from the household,
Don't bite the duck's head.
they
Duck
found
ain't doing
Aidan
nothing.
floating face down in a pond. He had fallen in and drowned. Travis and Olivia were beside themselves with grief over the death of their son, and unfortunately for them, their relationship just wasn't strong enough to withstand the heartache and pain they both felt. They blamed themselves. They blamed each other. Both of them racked with a guilt that would never cease to weigh them down. Olivia withdrew into herself. She did not return to work, rarely left the house, ceased attending her local church, and began to shut out her friends, family, and eventually, even her husband. The couple divorced the following year, and Travis moved east to make a fresh start. Olivia, on the other hand, chose to remain at the ranch, living alone and in seclusion, surrounded by the 13 acres of wilderness attached to the household. No one ever saw or heard from her again, save for a brief sighting by a neighbour late in 1991. Phone calls and letters went unanswered. Visitors to the house were ignored, except for the groceries which she had delivered. But for all other intents and purposes, she was completely closed off from the rest of the world. Years went by without so much as a peep from her, and people began to wonder whether she even still lived at the property. That was until the 27th of February 1994, when the police department in Salina received a 911 call from an unknown
Some people
source.
don't like ducks. Ducks
The
can be kind
operator
of
who
vicious
answered the
sometimes.
call heard only silence on the other end.
That's why I like the rubber
before
ducks.
the
They
line
don't bite.
clicked and eventually cut off after a couple of minutes.
And they're cute.
As procedure dictated, the police
Yeah, it
department
loves
began
to
to trace
eat
the
them.
call, but before long, the phone rang a second time, and the operator was again met with the same eerie silence. In all, 3 calls were made from the same number, all of them silent, and all of them traced to the same address: the Footlights Ranch, the home of Olivia Mabel.
My
A patrol
cat?
car was sent to check on the house, but the police officers found that it was completely locked down. They couldn't see through any of the windows, which were whitewashed.
Only Biddy goes outside
and
and
the
he doesn't
front
like.
door
Oh,
had not been used
Zaffy's
in
got
so
a cat.
long
Oh, that makes sense.
that it had swelled
They're saying
and bowed
Biddy's the only one who
outwards
goes
into
outside
the
and he's
door
scared of
frame
everything.
so that it was jammed shut.
Can you reheat
Thinking
this
that
for me?
someone could be in distress,
Oh, it's a Boba.
the police
What
officers
you
broke
doing,
open
baby?
the front entrance and entered the stricken home,
What?
and what they found defied all logic. The interior of the house was in a serious state of neglect, with layers of dust piled upon the furniture and cobwebs infesting every crack, corner and crevice. Each room looked as though it had not been touched in years, let alone lived
I
in.
wish I could turn the
And
camera
this was
around
the same
to show you
scene
my
that
cat
greeted
sleeping,
the officers as they explored
but I
the
might
rest of the
accidentally catch
household.
my face.
That was until they
And
reached
then I will
what
have to
had once
delete my
been Aiden's
existence.
room. Inside, they found all of his clothing and toys stored neatly away
Go live in the
drawers
woods?
and cupboards.
Nah, the woods
Everything
wouldn't
was
be safe for
pristine
me.
and tidy. No dust, no cobwebs. It had all been perfectly well kept.
Trust me, I will
In
never
the centre
reveal
of
my
the
face.
room, they found Olivia Mabel in a nightgown and slippers, sitting
You
in a
wanna keep
rocking
watch-
chair,
I'm not hideous.
deceased. Clutched in her hands was a small doll made in her son's image, wrapped in pieces of his clothing. Officers reported that it looked as though she had been dead for a couple of months. In front of her was a makeshift altar made in Aiden's honour,
What? We're keeping up
decorated with
traditions. We
candles,
got a Friday
fresh
raid on a
flowers,
Friday. Why didn't the
and
alerts
her
go
late
off?
son's possessions, as well as
didn't the
photographs
alerts
and
go off?
drawings of him. Amongst
That's
his
so
toys,
weird.
they found heartbreaking letters
Thank you for the
written by a
raid.
grieving
Welcome
mother
in,
to her
raiders.
lost son.
I'm Tiger Claw. I'm doing an art
Needless
stream.
to say,
The community
it
picked
was
this
quite
picture.
upsetting for those
Let
present,
me pause the story.
but there was a question.
So the community picked this picture, and then I rolled a spinner to decide what colors I use, and I got blue. This is like a red, a pink, a yellow, and a gray. So that's what I got to use to color this. This is something I'm doing for mostly for Halloween. Why do this? We're listening to bedtime stories, which is spooky stories. And yeah, I'm just really big into Halloween. If you're wondering what I am a gargoyle who's partly a cat. Rawr. But mostly I am a variety streamer. I'm gonna be playing a game later. Right now we're doing art. And sometimes I do art. I do mostly games, but I like doing art. This is my art skin. And yeah, welcome in. What's good, Friday? How was stream? Hope you killed many and won many battles. For the Empire. Or whatever it is. If you see my face, you won't be comfy streaming. So, don't worry. No, I've got it very safe and secure. No one's gonna see my face. I know. I love Halloween. I wait all year for this. I got certain games planned out for this season. Games I've been wanting to play, such as Ghostwire Tokyo. I'm gonna play Ludo when I buy it. It was good. I'm stuck at Havoc 20. Is that bad? Hold on. Everyone hang on. I gotta go fetch my coffee from the microwave. So I'm gonna put the story back on and I'll be right back.
Which hung bleeding in the air like an open wound. Who had made the 911 call? Francesca Santiago was one of the first officers on the scene, and she described what they found that day. There was no sign of forced entry, other than the front door where the police had come in, and no sign of anyone else having visited or having entered the property. All doors and windows were locked from the inside, and even the phone exhibited a layer of dust, showing no indication of having been lifted in order to make the call. And if that wasn't strange enough, things took an even more bizarre turn when an officer examined one of the letters, which had obviously been written by Olivia. The exact wording was as follows: "My Aiden, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I should have never let it get like this. I'm leaving. I will not let you keep me, you vile, evil creature. Mummy's coming for you. Aiden, my sweet Aiden. Mummy loves you." The thing that both mystified and disturbed investigators about this letter was that it was dated the 27th of February 1994, the day the police had entered her home, the day her body had been found. Other worrying signs pointed to the possibility that Olivia had been dabbling in occult practices. Adorning the makeshift altar dedicated to
Mostly
Aidan,
because Bear got the
there were
coffee
a
for
number
me.
of
Thank you for
characters
the
written
water.
in Sanskrit, which when translated were found to spell construct
Alright, enjoy your
or
alert,
to
Friday.
build.
Thanks for rating
It is
me.
believed that Olivia had been trying to construct a tulpa, or thought form. Given the altar, Sanskrit, isolation, obsession, and finally the doll which was found clutched in her hand, this could be seen as a fair assumption.
Should I make
Olivia
one of the
might have
ghosts
been
pink?
channeling her boundless grief into manifesting an entity in her son's image. Tibetan Buddhism sheds some light on this practice, saying that a being can be created through sheer spiritual or mental discipline and powerful concentration of thought. Considering her desperation and powerful emotional state, could Olivia have constructed a being of pure thought? And based on her letter dated the 27th of February, could this being have slipped the shackles of her control and turned against her, perhaps taking her life in the process? Francesca, in particular, notes that she and other officers felt a strong, angry presence looming over the household when they arrived, and it is difficult to explain certain aspects of this case without considering the paranormal. The current owner, Christopher Hagen, has been unable to sell the property, and it has remained empty for almost 25 years. Prospective buyers are apparently put off by the oppressive atmosphere they feel upon entering the home. Christopher himself reported multiple paranormal occurrences during renovation work and beyond. In 2005,
It's
he
usually
invited
renovation work
Austin-based
that ends up
paranormal
stirring
investigator
up the ghosts.
Drew Navarro to visit the property. Navarro claimed that out of the hundreds of locations he has studied, he has never felt such an imposing force, and went on to report how he could not breathe upon entering the home. He described feeling a constant, shifting energy which
That
behaved
moon looks
erratically,
tasty.
like a jealous child throwing a tantrum,
Well, it's definitely
and
not
that at
cheese
no
because I'm
point
making partly
did it feel
blue.
inviting.
I guess it'd be blue cheese.
He finished by saying the house should be avoided, and a serious intervention is needed, as he didn't quite know what he was dealing with. So what killed Olivia Mabel? Did she die of a broken heart, or was there something far more sinister at work? Before we make any assumptions, allow us to consider the alternatives. It is, of course, possible that someone entered the home, wrote the letter, and placed the call to the police, but there was no sign of forced entry, and coupled with the fact that the phone and house in general had not been disturbed in months, this seems unlikely.
Just need some crackers.
Our minds
yeah.
are drawn then to question whether this whole incident even took place at all. Whilst a death certificate does exist for 7-year-old Aidan Mabel, which determines a death by misadventure and lists both Travis and Olivia as his parents, amateur investigators have found no such death certificate
Maybe
for
she's
his
just
mother.
trying to feed you.
Secondly, there is no coroner's report detailing the cause of Olivia's death. Also noted is the complete absence of any online news articles regarding the bizarre circumstances in which her body was found. One would think that local press, at the very least, would have jumped on such a strange story, as they did with Christopher Case back in 1991, which raises yet another red flag. Finally, as far as we can tell, reports of this strange case only started to surface a couple of years ago. This was roughly around the same time that a Kickstarter campaign was initiated in order to fund a movie entitled Thought Form, based upon the events surrounding Olivia Mabel's death.
I'm making this ghost
Many
pink.
skeptics point to this as a clear sign of viral marketing, something many film studios employ in this wonderful modern age of the internet. But as dubious as all this sounds, none of it is clear-cut proof of a hoax. Just because a death
Feed me
certificate
with
for Olivia
projectile
Mabel
cheese.
has not been
I got
found
a cheese gun.
does not mean it does not
It
exist.
shoots cheddar.
Relatives may have wished to keep her death out of the press.
Pinky
And finally,
in the brain.
a couple of opportunistic filmmakers who stumbled upon an intriguing story and decided to make
Never
a film
understood why
out of
his
it
name was Pinky. It
does
wasn't
not
really
mean
that
the
pink.
whole affair is part of a shrewd marketing campaign.
I mean, he was
When
a
all
white
is said and
mouse.
done, this story is out there, and whether it is true or not, it's sad enough to bring a tear to the eye and creepy enough to send a chill up the spine. If it is fictional, then it has done its job as a piece of art in making the viewer, listener, or reader feel at least something. If it is indeed true, however, then we can only hope that Olivia has finally been reunited with her beloved Aidan, and that they both rest in everlasting peace together.
Pink ears? Yeah, but didn't Brain have pink ears too, though?
During the Cold War, soldiers stationed on an army base in Germany found themselves at the mercy of sinister and terrifying paranormal activity. Events were said to be so frightening that some of the men apparently committed suicide. Was there a dark history surrounding the base, and could it reveal the secrets of Cell Neues Rathaus?
There we go. One pink ghost with yellow eyes. Alright, what should I do about the spider? I think I'll just paint it black. Or gray, whatever. At least the spider will be normal.
It was April 1945, and the forces of the Wehrmacht, under the command of Adolf Hitler, were in a full-scale retreat across Germany as the Western Allies pushed east into the fatherland. German soldiers were surrendering in their thousands, a humiliating end for a military machine which had once outgunned and outmatched the forces of any other nation. On the 10th of April, the US 84th Infantry Division crossed the Weser River and captured Hanover, a city which had been bombed almost into oblivion by Allied air raids, resulting in 90% of the city centre being reduced to rubble, so there was little to no resistance when US ground forces arrived. The war had
You know
been
what? It
long,
kind of does, yeah.
its end overdue,
Now I want one.
and the overextended, under-resourced German soldiers had had enough. Their morale had collapsed along with the buildings around them. The surrounding townships soon followed suit, raising the white flag as soon as Allied armour rolled into view. One of these towns, sitting 20 miles northeast of Hanover, was Cell, a small, unassuming settlement of around 40,000 people, but one which was well known for housing one of the largest freestanding brick-built structures in Europe at that time, its Neues Rathaus. Neues Rathaus simply translates to New Town Hall, and nearly every single German town and city has one. There is nothing special or unusual about its name, but there is something special, and definitely unusual, about this Rathaus in particular. And whilst this story is famous amongst the British and German soldiers who took up residence there during the Cold War, it is relatively unknown to the wider world. The town of Cell surrendered on the 12th of April 1945.
The picture is very
As with
cute, yeah.
Hanover, there
I
was
got
no
a
resistance
whole
from
coloring
German
book of
forces,
cute Halloween
and
pictures.
certainly not from
And
any
then
of the
I let
civilians
everyone vote
residing
on
in
which
the
picture
bombed-out
I
buildings. The
I
town
color
hall
for the
had
stream.
miraculously escaped the bombing campaign,
And everyone
relatively
unanimously
unscathed,
voted for the
and
cat.
being the gargantuan structure that it was, seemed the perfect place to
I
house
thought for sure
occupying
Patches
troops
was going to vote
and
for the
form
dog.
some sort of temporary administration. It had, after all, served as a barracks for German troops, and had even housed an SS battalion. The building itself had 5 floors above ground and 5 floors below. But what US forces quickly realised after taking control of the rat house was that they could not access
What's
the
up,
lower
Fuzz
levels.
Fuzz?
They had been completely flooded with water. This immediately piqued the interest of the commanding officer, as he could see no reason for the SS to have gone to such an effort, unless they were trying to hide something. Over the next few days, he would make a determined effort to ascertain exactly what the Germans had attempted to cover up, and the events that followed would become known in military circles as the legend of Cell Neues Rathaus. On the 15th of April, at the special request of Lieutenant General Brian Horrocks, commander of the 84th Infantry Division, 3 US Navy divers arrived in Cell with the intention of reconnoitring the submerged depths of the building. It was a daunting prospect for any diver, let alone these men, who were some of the best trained in the world. Swimming down into a maze of confined rooms and corridors in pitch-black darkness would be enough to unnerve even the hardiest of men. Due to the obvious dangers, each diver was tethered by a line to the surface and sent down at different entry points. What took place over the next half hour is not fully understood, but what is known is that 2 of the divers never made it back to the surface. Their tethers were retrieved, but not
They
their
were
bodies.
eaten by sharks.
The 3rd diver, however, did resurface, apparently raving like a lunatic. When he finally came to his senses after a couple of hours, he reported seeing strange symbols and pentagrams etched into the walls and floors of some of the rooms on the first 2 levels. On the 3rd level down,
What's light?
he said that in the darkness, he had seen mutilated corpses strapped into chairs. He reported that they were in a horrifying state. Some had their abdomens ripped wide open, or all of their limbs removed, and others had had goats' heads attached to their bodies in place of their own. Whilst this was terrifying enough, he spoke in whispered tones about how he had seen them moving, as if they were still alive. This had caused him to panic and swim back to the surface. He said a dark cloudy mass had chased him through the water. By all accounts, this man was never the same again, and was discharged from the Navy shortly afterwards. The commanding officer was reluctant to investigate further, as he did not wish to put more lives at
this thing?
risk. In
It's
any
just
case,
to help
time was
the
running
picture be
short,
seen
as
clear
Sal
on
was in the
camera.
British zone of occupation, and British forces would soon be arriving to relieve the Americans. The building was handed over to the British Army on the 21st of April, and the basements were sealed over with concrete shortly thereafter. During the Cold War, Cell became a very important garrison town, staging a sizable contingent of NATO forces. The town hall was converted into a permanent army barracks, and housed regiments from the British and German militaries. The stories regarding the flooded lower levels and the fate of the US Navy divers were rife during this period, and many believed them to be nothing more than urban legends. But no one could get away from the fact that access to the basement floors was indeed restricted. It was obvious that most
You
stairwells
lost
leading
power
down
again?
into the lower
Damn.
levels had been hastily filled with
That
concrete,
sucks.
as the tops of banisters or handrails could be seen protruding from the floor. The question was, why? Paranormal phenomena in and around the barracks were commonplace. An infantryman by the name of Stephen Daly reported that on his first night in the building as a new recruit, he saw silhouettes of people walking back and forth outside his window. He didn't think much of this at the time, as soldiers would have been on patrol, but he realised the next morning that his window was actually 7 feet above the ground on the outside of the building. Daly served 4 years in Cell during the 1980s, and he experienced all kinds of strange goings-on, such as hearing jackboots marching on the parade grounds and through hallways, even though half the camp was on leave and no parades were taking place.
Is that the reason why he hasn't
instances
really
of
been
people
streaming
hearing
lately?
voices conversing in
He keeps
German
losing
in
power?
locked and empty rooms. A sergeant major was utterly stupefied in the early hours of one morning when he witnessed a column of German panzer tanks passing by in complete and utter silence. The strangeness didn't end there. A young private by the name of Martin Fox woke one night to find that the ceiling of his bedroom was only inches away from his face. At first, he thought it was his roommates playing a prank, but when he realised his bed was actually floating several feet above the floor, he screamed out, and both he and the bed came crashing down, waking his sleeping comrades. Other soldiers reported having their rooms vandalised, even though they had been locked and secured in the intervening times, and no one else had been in there. Some even saw dark shadowy figures standing at the ends of their beds and in hallways. Most unsettling was the unusually high rate of suicides amongst the men stationed at the rat house. There were certain rooms on the upper levels which were said to have had pentagrams etched into the floors and walls, and legend has it that many recruits ended up taking their own lives shortly after spending the night in them on a dare. A large number of soldiers were also discharged on medical grounds after undergoing psychological evaluations. Many of them had become deeply depressed during their tour of duty, and officials felt that they could be a danger to themselves and others if they remained in active service.
I saw one post about
it. The general feeling throughout the ranks inhabiting the base was that a dark, oppressive atmosphere hung over the town in general. After all, Bergen is a suburban district of Cell, and this is, of course, where the infamous Belsen concentration camp was situated. In fact, many Jewish prisoners were transported by rail into the town centre before being dispatched to Belsen thereafter, and although Cell was captured during the war without a single bullet being fired, it was no less a scene of unwavering tragedy, a place where thousands upon thousands of innocent people lost their lives in an untimely and barbaric manner. Could the very knowledge of this had had a negative effect on the men's moods and behaviours? And if so, why did this dark cloud seem to hang specifically over the rat house? The rumours around camp were intriguing to say the least. It is no secret that the Nazi regime, and in particular Heinrich Himmler, had a deep-seated interest in the occult. It is thought that the Third Reich was looking to harness untold powers in order to tip the fortunes of war in their favour. For instance, there are tales of German troops making expeditions to Antarctica to locate hidden entrances to the so-called Hollow Earth, which would supposedly lead them to a dormant race of giants. Other rumours suggest that the Spear of Destiny was stolen from a museum in Vienna to aid in the summoning of dark forces, and that German naval commanders employed the use of dowsing in an attempt to locate British submarines and merchant vessels. Hitler himself was no stranger to paranormal experiences, as he had recorded such instances in his private journals many times. But what does all this have to do with the rat house in Cell? The study of witchcraft was high up on the agenda for the German elite, and the rat house was said to be one of many sites across the country where the SS carried out such research and even experimentation on human subjects, in this case, Jewish prisoners from Belsen. There were rumours that the SS were summoning dark and sinister forces in the rooms situated on the lower levels, and that prisoners were being horribly mutilated in order for their bodies to become more accepting of demonic possession. The building itself is said to have occult symbolism running all the way through it, from the way it is laid out to the very smallest of details, such as the shapes of concrete tie rods and decorative architecture. Many believe the rat house served as an antenna or gateway which amplified the effects of such practices. A German soldier who had been stationed there during the Cold War years had an interesting and somewhat bizarre story to tell. Posting anonymously on an internet forum back in 2009, he recalled how his father had told him that the SS had been attempting to bring soldiers back from the dead, allowing demonic entities to possess the deceased and use their bodies as vessels. His father went on to describe how attempts in doing this had been successful, but that these reanimated corpses apparently had no sense of honour or loyalty, and that research in this area was abruptly halted. Connections to the occult are further reinforced by the supposed etchings of pentagrams, and particularly the accounts of the third diver who reported seeing people with goats' heads strapped into chairs whilst exploring the basements. That is, of course, if the story regarding the US Navy divers is to be believed. One would have to question exactly what was down there in those cold, dark depths, and what had been responsible for taking the lives of 2 of the men. Could it have been something paranormal or even supernatural? Or was it something altogether more rational, such as the fact that it was a dangerous assignment to begin with, that 2 of the divers became trapped, and that the third worked himself up into a panic as a result of the dark and confined spaces? Of course, we must also ask whether the diving incident even happened at all.
What do you mean not
Reading
even
the
with
story
lightning?
back, one has to admit that it has all the hallmarks of an urban legend, all the clichés of fabrication, perhaps concocted to frighten new recruits. There is no doubt that the rat house in Cell does have floors below ground which are inaccessible and have been covered over with concrete. Whether they are or were flooded
You know what I just
is
realized?
another matter. After all, how practical would
Wednesday
it have
show?
been to fill the equivalent volume of a football stadium with water? Surely gutting the building with fire would have been a far quicker
What,
and
my
easier
Wednesday
method
show?
of destroying any evidence of
What
whatever
I just
had been
realized
going
is,
on there. Unless the SS were not
these
trying
eyes
to
have
hide
got to be like
evidence,
painted on or
but
whatever,
instead to quarantine
because you can't see
whatever
the cat body, which
abominations
should
they
be
had
there.
created. The likelihood is that we'll never know for sure. What is less easy to explain, however, is the sheer amount of paranormal activity that soldiers experienced whilst on the base. There are far too many accounts, even from higher ranks, to dismiss this altogether.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna make him glowy.
If you are lucky enough to speak to any British or German soldier stationed here during the Cold War, you'll more than likely find that they believe there was definitely something evil and twisted about the rat house. This likely supports the idea that something sinister was going on in the
that
maze
show.
of dark halls and rooms at
Right.
its lower levels
I don't
at
have
some point
Netflix.
during its history. Whether it had connections to the occult or otherwise is up for debate.
I think it's on Netflix.
In any case, British and German forces vacated the premises entirely in 2012, and the building was repurposed as originally intended, to embody the seat of local government. Parts of it have also been converted into a hotel, which has seen glowing reviews from visitors on various travel websites. That said, guests still report, even to
No,
this
don't
day,
be sorry.
strange goings-on, and the ever-present
I just
sound
use my money to buy other
of
things, like
jackboots echoing through the halls.
I pay for Xbox
It
Pass
seems the secrets
and PlayStation Plus,
of
so
Selma
we have the
Rat
ultimate
House
amount of games we can
live
play
on.
at any time. Also, I have Hulu for like really cheap because everyone started to boycott them, so they gave me like an offer for 6 months at $3. I'm like, okay, you can have $3. I'll give you $3. Yeah, I got they're glitter pens. I got a bunch of them. I got a whole box of them. Hold on, check this out. Look at that. All glitter pens of all sorts of colors. Normally I don't care about glitter, but I think it adds a nice texture to the imagery that I color. Well, see, if you canceled it during the boycott, you didn't get an offer. I was already off of it for like a couple months when they offered me, hey, come back for $3. They mostly did it because when everyone started to boycott it, they were about to do a price
Whilst
hike.
cycling to work early one morning,
So consider
a
yourself
young
lucky.
man had a chilling face-to-face encounter with a ghostly apparition. But
Yeah,
the
I
terror
like them.
would not end there.
I used to use markers
The
until I
entity
started
would
getting
go on
into
to
glitter
stalk him
pens.
for weeks afterwards, leaving him with a terrifying vision of the Wraith of Trench Pool.
I got like everything. I got glitter pens, regular colored pens, markers. I use colored pencils. Don't use crayons. Just since growing up, crayons can be kind of hard to control in my sense. Nothing against them. I'll color with them. I actually do have a box of them, but Tiger, have you what? Have I what? Finish. Considered fountain pens. Isn't it really expensive to get ink for them, though? And do they make them in colors? Last fountain pen I had was just regular black fountain pen. They are. I got one as a
The switch
graduation
clicks back into
gift that
position
got stolen
as
from
the
my
kettle
car.
came to the boil. Steam rose as its contents were poured into a waiting mug, the rich flowing burble of water whispering through the air. The smell of coffee filled the room, seeping into every corner, almost as overpowering as the darkness smothering the further recesses of the kitchen. The bulb had blown the night before,
Is that a
and
lavender
Rhys
scented?
Matthews
That's
was preparing
interesting.
his drink
I didn't know they
by
came
the
in
light of the
scented.
adjacent hallway, which wasn't particularly bright. But that was the nature of energy-saving bulbs, just luminous enough to get by. Taking a sip from his mug,
that's the kicker, though.
he regarded the scene in front of him. The world outside his window was cold, dark, and wet. It was late October in 2015, and
I'm
the
the
reputation
type
of the
of
British
nerd
winter weather
that gets excited
preceded
at cool
itself.
school supply
A
sales.
sideways drizzle
A
was
chance to
scoring the
get
landscape of
new
the cobbled
pens
roads and townhouses
and
inhabiting
notebooks.
his street. Jesus,
Because
he
I'm that
thought to
type of
himself,
nerd.
I should get a taxi. But a quick glance to the clock put paid to that idea.
There's
It was
color changing ones
4:30
too.
a.m. and the taxi
Interesting.
firms were still charging double time.
I have to look into that.
It was a thought that had occurred to him every single morning, but the outcome was always the same. He just didn't have the money to waste on cabs. The buses weren't running at that time in the morning either, so his only option was, and always had been, to cycle to work. Rhys lived in the town of Telford in Shropshire, England, famed as one of the birthplaces of industry and home to the world-renowned Iron Bridge. Telford is a thriving municipality of around 170,000 people, one of the fastest growing towns in the UK. For this reason, the routes of transportation are excellent, and cycle paths complement most busy roads throughout
But
the
I
town
broke
itself.
the addiction to them.
This was at least some comfort to Rhys, who
When you're
had
trying to
brave
get me
the quieter
addicted, I don't
traffic
know
of
if you
the early
completely
morning every
broke
single
it.
day. Quieter traffic, of course, often
They
led
are.
to more reckless driving by some, so the cycle paths were a welcome alternative to the roads themselves.
I actually got a couple. You want to see them?
Parts of his route,
I
however,
haven't been able to
would
buy
take him
any
off
in a
the
while,
beaten
but I got them like right here.
along dark paths
This one's one of my
where no
favorites.
street lamps shone. But that was the last thing on his mind as he finished his coffee, slipped on his waterproof coat,
And then
and mounted his
I
bike,
got this one
ready for his daily 5-mile journey to the manufacturing plant
because
where
I'm a
he
sucker
worked.
for camo.
The world was still submerged in darkness when he left. It was just coming up to 5
Let's see what
a.m.
else I got.
and sunrise at that time
Got
of
some other
year
camo
wasn't
ones.
until after 6. The going was
I got
easy.
this one.
There weren't too many hills,
This
and if
one.
there were, the inclines were gentle. The rain, on the other hand, was more
This
troublesome.
one.
There was no avoiding it.
Oh, this one's my favorite.
It pierced the
on.
exposed skin of his face like 1,000 icy
Bam!
shards.
Orange camo.
In some small way, it felt invigorating.
Let's see what else I got.
In most others, it was
I
an
got
incorrigible nuisance.
Ninja Turtles.
But never did it pose any kind of threat in stopping him.
Oh,
He
You're
cycled
gonna love
on
this
through
one,
the
Zaffy.
rows
You
of
ready?
dark
You ready for
houses
this?
and
You ready?
shops. Every now
Bam!
and then, a vehicle of some description would come tearing past, taking advantage of the empty roads. But for the most part, the world was silent and peaceful.
Hey, Cass.
This close to the depths of
Yeah.
winter, most birds had
see.
already flown south,
What else
so
do I
not even
got?
they made a sound.
Some regular ones.
Rhys often used
Oh.
this time for reflection. His route was so routine by now that he could often navigate on
Tiger,
autopilot,
you must
leaving
let
him
them
free
breathe?
to think on things. At
What
the
do you
midpoint
mean?
of his journey, he turned off the main highway and began to cycle down an old gravel path, which would take him past Trench
Why?
Pool. Trench
I'm
Pool is a
curious
large
why.
body of water, used mainly as a balancing lake, but is often fished by the locals. The pathway was
I
confined
don't
on
even know if
both
I've written in
sides,
some of these yet. I haven't
with
written
the pool
anything
to its
yet.
left and the thick brush to the right, the other side of which there was a busy dual carriageway.
Don't worry about it.
There were no street lamps adorning this part of the route.
I'm a bit of a
It was a long,
amateur
straight
rider,
path,
and I
running
bought
at
them
least
to ride in.
250 meters in length, and would have
And then
otherwise
I got
been
into
hidden in
streaming, so
darkness
go figure.
if not for Reese's high-powered bicycle
Most of these
lamp.
haven't been used yet.
It shone so
I
brightly
will use them.
that he could
Guarantee
see
I
all the
will
way
use
to
them.
the end of the track
This
in
one I
front
think
of
I
him.
used. Yeah, I got some writing there.
He began to pick up the pace
First story.
as he noticed that the route ahead was clear. With his head down, he switched into a lower
I
gear
gotta put all these
and
back.
began to pump the pedals with all the power his leg
We'll do
muscles
that
could muster.
later.
He was now travelling at speed, but something,
I fuzz.
he didn't know what, made him look up from the path immediately in front of him. No more than 3 meters away stood a figure. He was moving at such a velocity that he was sure he was going to collide with whoever it was, and in that instant, time
tried
slowed to a
writing once?
crawl, as is often the case
I've
in
always
such
been kind of a
circumstances.
writer in my head.
Everything
coming up
happened
with
in slow
stories
motion.
I want to tell.
And for this reason, Reese was able to take in every
I
single
kind of do a
detail.
little bit of everything. A little bit of writing, a little bit of drawing. I
The
like
figure was that of a woman,
painting,
dressed in
coloring.
formal office wear, and holding a handbag tightly at her shoulder with one hand. She stood with her legs together, and on her feet, she
I'd
wore
get into
high-heeled
necklace
shoes.
making, but I don't have the money
Of her
for
features he could
materials.
see nothing.
But I've
She
been
was
wanting to do
looking
it for
down
a
at the
while
floor,
now.
and her drenched black locks hung down over her face. As he closed in on her, she did not move. She did not cry out in panic. She did not even flinch. She did not react in any way, shape or form. She simply stood there, stock still and deathly silent. At the last moment, Reese
It's
adjusted
alright,
his
Storms.
handlebars just enough
We
to
all go through
sailing
our own
past,
struggles.
missing her by mere inches.
It's fine
But
to
still
take
she
time off
stood
to
there,
collect yourself.
unmoving. He immediately slammed on his brakes, skidding sideways in the wet gravel and almost falling off his bike. He turned back towards her to apologise, but there was no one there.
I used to, every October,
Confused,
write
he looked from left to right
scary
and
stories
back
for my
again,
dad's radio show.
but the woman was nowhere to be seen. Once he realised
I
the
might
truth of the matter,
ask him for the.
that there was nowhere
They took
else
the
she could
stories I
possibly have
wrote,
gone,
and then they
every
recorded
single
them
hair on
reading
his
it.
entire
So
body
I might
stood on end.
get a copy of all those to play
Stunned,
during a stream.
he turned back
maybe
around and
closer to
continued
Halloween.
cycling along the path, not once looking back, for fear of what he might see. He was fully convinced that he had just seen a ghost. He spent most of that day at work in near silence, only opening his mouth to speak when he needed to, walking in trance-like disbelief. Colleagues noticed this change in him, but he told them nothing of what he had seen. On the way back home, he took a different route, and would in fact steer clear of cycling along Trench Pool
When I do
for
write,
months
I
afterwards.
like writing about
But as much as he tried to
fantasy
avoid
stuff.
bumping into whatever he had seen
I
that
rarely
morning,
write about people. It's
that
usually like
choice,
orcs
it would seem,
or
would not be
gargoyles
his.
or like
About a week after
other
his sighting,
minotaurs,
Reese was walking to his local shop
tiger
to buy
people,
some beer.
cat people.
It was late evening,
Create my
around
own
10
races.
p.m, and the sun had long since set. He was on a path next to a main road, with
I'm a
houses
sucker
on
for
either
fantasy.
side, but the streets were empty. A
Trolls.
car would pass every now and then.
I was supposed to talk
But
about
for the
main
most
characters.
part,
Yeah, there is a troll
walked in
one of my
silence underneath
stories, but
orange
mostly
fluorescent street
the
lamps.
heroes are like orcs or gargoyles
What
or
happened
tiger
at
people.
Trench Pool the week before had played heavily on his mind in the time since,
I like orcs.
but he had resolved to put it down to tiredness and the possibility that his mind was playing tricks on him. He wasn't even thinking
I've
about
been
the
working on a
incident at the
story in my
time.
head for a while.
His thoughts were on
That's
other
basically
things,
a story
such
about
as video
like
games
dinosaur
or TV
nights.
shows he had been watching. But out of nowhere came the sound of high-heeled shoes walking behind him, echoing off the faces of the houses lining the road. He did not turn. In fact, he thought little of it until the footsteps started getting louder and closer. Whoever it was walking behind him, they were obviously going at a faster pace than he was, and so he decided to stop and let them past, as the path was only narrow. As he slowed, he turned his head to indicate his intention, but to his complete and utter shock, the pathway was empty, and the sound of footsteps abruptly stopped. There would be many more instances like this whenever he was walking alone, either during the day or late at night, and it would never fail to chill him to the bone. He also suffered from episodes of sleep paralysis during this time,
I would like to make
and whenever it occurred, he swore he could feel a presence
storytelling a
somewhere
part
in the room
of
with him, watching.
my streams, but with my stutter,
On
I
other
can't read
occasions,
my
he
own
would be
works
standing,
back between
minding his own
dyslexia and
business,
stutter.
when he would suddenly get
I
the
can't,
unshakable
so
feeling that
I've
someone
talked
was
to my
stood
parents
right at
about
his
maybe
shoulder.
having them
So
record my
close,
stories so I can
it
play
felt
them.
as though they were trying to whisper something in his ear, but he never heard a peep. This continued for some time, and just as Reese felt as if he was beginning to lose his
But
mind,
I haven't been able to
the
decide
activity began
exactly
to
what story I
abate.
want to start telling.
Life would return to normal
Kind of
for
want to
him,
like do like a little series.
but it would be months before he
like
dared
once a
cycle
week,
anywhere near
tell a
Trench
piece
Pool.
of it.
Only when the sun began to rise earlier, as winter gave way to spring, did he feel brave enough to take the gravelled pathway running past the lake. He would always wonder what it was he had seen in that cold, dreary October of 2015.
Yeah.
And he would go on to tell close friends of his experience.
Since getting nerve damage, I kind of
Through them,
stopped
he would come
writing
to
it
learn
on
that he was
paper
not the only
and started
person to have
typing it
experienced something strange in
computer.
that area. There were stories of fishermen
I still miss
who had
writing it
seen
in
figures
notebooks,
stood
and
on the
I still
gravel
might,
pathway,
if anything, just
which
to
wouldn't have been anything
to
out of
kind
the
of keep
ordinary,
track of notes and
if
stuff.
not for the fact that these figures were often faceless.
I'm a sucker for the
and
old ways.
sometimes even hovering
When I
a
was
few
7
feet
years
above the
old,
ground.
my grandmother gave me my very first
The sound of
typewriter.
ghostly footsteps had also been heard walking along the wooden jetties at either end of the pool. And in
And I
another chilling
used that thing
account,
a lot.
a man walking along the same gravel pathway had heard a low, guttural growl, like nothing he had ever heard before, coming from the brush
And this was
running
back
next to the
when
walkway.
home computers were
It seems
barely
the
a
lake
thing.
is no stranger to paranormal activity, and there are perhaps some valid reasons for this. In mid-2017,
I didn't get my first
one of
computer
Reese's
until I
friends
was like
happened to
21,
overhear an interesting
and
conversation
it was a
about
very old
Trench Pool.
IBM, but I loved it.
It included comments from an amateur diving instructor who one morning, many years before, had received a phone call from an officer at Mallinsgate Police Station in Telford
Ideas
Town
don't
Centre.
flow as well.
Reese's friend learned
Same for
that
me.
there had been an
Oddly
altercation
enough, I
between
kind
a
of
group
need
of
to kind of
teenagers
give
on the banks
myself
of the
like
lake,
new
and one of them
stimuli
had
or
fallen
music
in and
to
was
kind of get them
suspected to
flowing.
have drowned. The police had called for his
So I
assistance,
try to do new
as
things
their own
and
diving team was
take in
training on
new
the other
things
side of the
just to get
country at
the
the time.
ideas flowing.
Under a thickening air of apprehension, he and another amateur diver had to suit up and swim out into the murky water, which went out to a depth of about 20 feet. That morning, they retrieved the body of an 18-year-old man from the lake, and it would not be the first or last time someone had lost their lives in those waters. As mentioned previously, there is a busy dual carriageway on the opposite side of the tall, dense hedge line
Why are you fidgeting?
running alongside the gravel path. Several lives have been claimed in tragic car accidents, which have seen vehicles plough through the brush and end up in the lake. Other times people have stumbled out of the nearby pub late at night, heavily inebriated, and decided to go for a swim,
chaos when
and have then
peeps
drowned in
went
the
wild
process.
with the spin
There is
ones.
no question
fidget
that there have been
toys.
several tragic
I got
deaths
one. You want to see
in
it?
and around the pool. But who was the young woman that Reese saw on that gravel pathway in the early hours of that
I'm gonna
morning?
sneeze again.
Could she have been the ghost of someone involved in some sort of accident? Or maybe the victim of something more sinister, something as yet unknown? Reese is unsure, but amidst all the chilling experiences which occurred in the aftermath of his sighting, he sometimes got the feeling that the presence was trying to communicate with him in some way. Whoever, or whatever it was, it had obviously noticed that he had noticed it, and maybe that is ultimately the reason he was followed. It has been nearly 2 years since his experience, and Reese still cycles to work. He has resumed his route alongside the lake, and although he has not seen anything since, the image of what he encountered is not so easy to forget. Indeed, there is never a time goes by where he doesn't feel a moment's hesitation before turning off down that gravel pathway. And although he may have laid his fears to rest, he feels the same cannot be said for whatever it is that haunts Trench Pool.
Alright, I had to kind of dig for it. I found it. And I particularly went on my way to search for one I would like. Got this on eBay some time ago. It's like a Chinese star.
Bedtime stories.
Look at that. It's real metal. It's pretty heavy. But this isn't sharp. It's kind of rounded. No, it's not sharp. It's a little pointy, but it's rounded. It doesn't hurt at all. Can't cut.
In April 1991, a man was found dead in his apartment after a week of telling friends that something was trying to kill him. Did he literally scare himself to death? Or was his passing the result of a terrifying curse? Join us this week as we take a look into the peculiar death of Christopher Case.
No, it's not. It looked really cool and I liked it. Bear's got one that's got like dragon heads on it, I think. We can't find where it is. It's somewhere. Yeah, when I got a fidget spinner, I'm like, I didn't want the typical one that everyone else had. I wanted one that looked really cool, so I digged and searched all over the internet for a very long time and got that one. I can't remember how much I spent on it, but that's like 10 years old or something. Got it before cancer. That's how I check time now. Everything's before cancer or after cancer. Hey Storms, all this
Christopher
whispering
Case
makes me
was a
think of my
small-town
crime.
radio DJ who had grown up in Richmond, Virginia. He was a well-rounded individual, intelligent, sophisticated, and an absolute fitness
I used
zealot
to have some
who took vitamin supplements
dungeon
daily
dice. I don't know
and
what happened to it. I
exercised
think it got
religiously.
stolen.
In his early 30s, he decided to move out west to Seattle in Washington State to start a new career as a music executive.
The fact that
He
it's starting
worked
in
for the
Seattle
Muzak
does not help
Holdings
the case.
Company, producing the soft music heard in lifts and waiting rooms all over the world. Chris was a popular young man. He had made good friends in his new role and still
And I
managed
just
to
haven't
keep
been
in
able to
regular
find
contact
a
with
set
old
of dice
friends
I
back in
like that I
Richmond.
want to buy.
But despite this, he was a bit of a loner and had remained single for many years. This is not strange in itself. His job required him to travel all over the United States, and he had a real passion for music, particularly compositions of the ancient world. Chris's idea of a good time was sitting at home listening to his favourite tracks, rather than going out to socialise of an
When they say
evening.
compositions of the ancient
He
world, do they
found
mean
solace in the
classical or something
arrangements of
else?
notes and harmonies, rather than in the company of others. He didn't want for much. He didn't bother other people, and in return, other people didn't bother him. And it is for this reason that nobody who knew him has ever been able to understand the week in the summer of 1991, which would ultimately end in tragedy. On the morning of Thursday, the 18th of April, Chris was found dead
God, ads
in his
coming in less than
apartment.
3 minutes.
There was no
Twitch
sign of a
decided to finally
struggle
alert
having
me about
taken
that.
place or of forced entry. His body was discovered fully clothed, sitting inside his empty bathtub in a kneeling position, with his head resting against the wall. It appeared as though he had simply fallen asleep and passed away. But when police officers searched the residence, they found a multitude of crucifixes, books on the occult, and saw that salt had been poured at the entrance to his home and along every single skirting board inside his apartment. They also heard religious music playing quietly in a number of rooms. At the scene, the coroner was able to determine that Mr. Case had died of heart failure. He was just 35 years old. Whilst the circumstances surrounding Chris's death and the state in which his apartment had been found were indeed odd, to say the least, the story which transpired over the following months of the investigation read like something straight out of a paranormal thriller. Shortly after his passing, friends reported that, in the days leading up to his death, Chris had called them in a panic on numerous occasions, saying that something was after him and that he feared for his life. He told friends that he was certain he would be dead before the end of the week. This baffled authorities, and what was originally thought to have been a death by natural causes would take on a much more sinister twist. After weeks of looking into the case, investigators discovered a very chilling side to this story. As it turned out, on the 11th of April, 7 days before his death, Chris had embarked on a business trip to San Francisco, meeting with other executives within the music industry. At some point during his visit, he had been introduced to an older woman who shared his passion for music of the ancient world, particularly that of Egypt and other Mediterranean civilizations. They seemed to have a lot in common, and as their conversation progressed, it became clear to Chris that this woman wished to pursue a romantic relationship with him. She made no secret of her feelings and asked him to take her home on more than one occasion. Being a man of integrity, he politely declined these requests. She was an attractive lady, but her intensity had unnerved the young executive. This, coupled with the fact that she was at least 20 years his senior, led Chris to suggest that they call it a night and go their separate ways.
AKA, she was a nasty old woman.
But this only seemed to anger her. She felt the full force of his rejection and then said something strange. She told him that she was a witch, that she would put a curse on him, and that he would be sorry.
Hey, Crow.
She told him
I knew you'd pop up.
that he would
Before
be
you
dead
ask, I meant to
within a
watch it
week.
today. I just ran out of time.
Chris, who thought of himself as a rational individual, simply shrugged this off. He did not believe in the paranormal or supernatural, and he was not religious in any sense of the word. So he disregarded her threats
I
and
will get
travelled
to
back
it
to
this weekend.
Seattle the next
I
day.
promise you.
He would relate this tale to his friend Sammy Sauder upon his return, who would dismiss it with the same
But
supposed
how are you today,
rationality.
Crow?
And
How's your
certainly,
Friday doing?
at least for the first few days after his return home,
Going.
he completely forgot
Whatever.
about the entire incident. However, on the morning of the 14th of April, Chris called Sammy in a panic, saying that he had been kept awake all night by the sound of whispering voices coming from somewhere inside his home, though he could not find the source. He would also go on to say how he had seen shadows moving around his apartment, even though he was the only one there, and that he felt like he was being watched during the night. This conversation would be the first of 3 frantic phone calls that Chris would make to Sammy over the next few days. On the 16th,
Ooh,
he
sick on a
called to tell
weekend.
her
That's
that
the
something
worst.
had attacked him during the night.
Hopefully it's not too bad.
He had woken to find himself paralysed, being throttled by unseen hands. The attack was particularly intense and violent, the force of it lifting him off his mattress before releasing him and throwing him back onto his bed. Afterwards, he had noticed tiny cuts on the ends of each one of his fingers, and that his bedsheets were stained with his blood.
Yeah, speedy recovery.
This instance would prove to be too much, and on the morning after, he visited a religious bookstore called Evangel Incorporated. The store manager, Rodney Higuchi, described how Chris had entered the store, walked over to one of the displays, and picked up a handful of crucifixes. Mr. Higuchi asked him how he intended to use them, and Chris told him what he believed to be the truth of the matter, that he was being attacked by paranormal entities and that he needed to defend himself. Rodney assisted as best he could and recommended a number of books on the subject of fighting witchcraft. Between his visits to the bookstore and his calls to concerned friends, Chris had begun a determined effort to fend off whatever mysterious forces had been tormenting him, and by the afternoon of the 16th, the battle lines had been drawn. He had placed a number of crucifixes
It's called
around his
bedtime
home,
stories. They're like spooky
which were
stories.
interspersed with candles, and he had poured lines of salt along the extremities of each room, leaving small
This is
piles
literally
in
what I
each
do
corner.
for fun.
He had also
I will
written
color
many
and
notes
listen
on
to
methods of combating evil
paranormal
spirits,
content.
which were scattered throughout his apartment.
I'm a weirdo.
It had been less than a week since his meeting with the strange woman, but Chris was a changed man, barely recognisable compared to the confident, rational young executive he had been only days beforehand. This was an obsessed individual, determined to the point
hell
of it being
yeah,
detrimental
I do.
to
You
his
know
health.
I do.
He
I love
wasn't
his
sleeping,
stuff.
and he had not shown up for work in 2 days. He called other friends besides Sammy, and they would describe how they could hear in his voice how
But he doesn't
utterly
do
afraid
exactly
he was.
ghost stories.
And unfortunately for Chris,
And I kind of wanted to
the
do the whole
evening of the
ghost thing as being
16th
Halloween, but
would
yeah.
be his most
I
harrowing
like Mr.
experience
Nightmare.
to date. It is not exactly clear what happened during the course of the night, but something frightened him so much that he left his
Yeah, he's
home
good at
during
what
the
he
early
does.
hours of the morning and stayed at a hotel. Because of this, Sammy could not get through to him the next morning. Her only recourse was to call a local police department and ask them to do a welfare check on Chris's property.
I'll give you that.
Upon
Yeah,
arrival,
his voice
they
is
found the
perfect
premises locked
for
and
storytelling.
were unable to get access. They left the scene and reported their findings back to a concerned Sammy. Living on the other side of the country, she felt distraught and helpless as to what else she could do, and had no other choice but to wait to hear from Chris. That evening, she came home to find a message stored on her answering machine. Little did she know it in that moment, but this would be the last time she ever heard from her friend. To her surprise, there was an eerie calm to the young man's voice, almost as if he had resigned himself to his fate. In the message, he spoke about how they had almost got him the night before, and that he believed this would be his last night on Earth. Sammy wouldn't be the only person to hear from Chris that day, however. He had also visited a Catholic priest in the afternoon, and later on, he had returned to Evangel Incorporated. On this occasion, Rodney Higuchi described how Chris had looked exhausted but desperate, and that he had asked for more advice on how to defend himself, which the store manager was only too happy to provide. Despite Chris's best efforts, he would lose his life on the night of the 17th of April, 1991. Myocarditis was listed as the official cause of death in the coroner's report, a sudden and seemingly inexplicable stopping of the heart. So did Christopher Case somehow manage to convince himself that he had been cursed and then literally scare himself to death? Or was there something far more mysterious and sinister at work? The jury is still out, even after all this time. Myocarditis is a rare but potentially deadly disease, affecting 1 in every 100,000 people. It is not hereditary and therefore not based on one's genetic makeup. It can afflict anyone at any time, but most commonly occurs in people between the ages of 20 and 40. It is not unheard of for myocarditis to strike young men and women who are otherwise fit and healthy, and
Sometimes
in fact,
it does paranormal
it has
stuff,
been the cause
but
of many
it's usually,
sudden deaths in young athletes
like,
around the
viewer
world.
submitted things.
Some medical experts have also suggested that there is a link between the disease and man-made supplements such as vitamins or steroids,
I
which
love
they
when
believe
Brits
could
say
aggravate an
vitamins.
existing condition.
I don't know why.
With this in mind, it is important to remember that Christopher Case was a fitness enthusiast. He went to the gym to exercise
I don't
daily.
know, man. Some of those
He
stories I
also
hear
took
him
vitamin
tell,
supplements.
you gotta.
And at the
It
age
feels
of
like people
35,
made them up.
he was well within the scope of being affected by this disease.
Some of them have like plot holes.
However, close friends and relatives of
Things
Mr.
don't add
Case
up.
are not so quick to just accept the possibility that he died of natural causes. First of all, there are a variety of other symptoms which usually manifest in sufferers of myocarditis,
I'm
such
not
as
saying
chest
all of
pain,
them, but
difficulty
I hear
breathing,
them every now and then.
and general fatigue. Furthermore, before a fatal attack such as this, the sufferer will usually display flu-like symptoms in the weeks leading up to their death. Chris experienced none of these things. He was an otherwise fit and healthy young man with a top-notch immune system. And then there is the small matter of Chris's mental state during those last 5 or 6 days. As we have already established, he was a stable individual
I
and
listen
not
to him
prone
when
to
it,
such
when, like,
flights of
when
fancy regarding the
I have
paranormal.
to go like cut up a
So
bunch of
why did he
chicken or prep
suddenly
dinner or
and
whatever. It
inexplicably
takes an hour or
change?
so.
Is it really
Put in my
possible
earbuds
for
and turn
someone
him on.
to go from being a sane, rational young man one day, only to change to a desperate and obsessed wreck of a man the next? It makes absolutely no sense. Finally, we are faced with the fact that Chris knew he
I
was
gotta
going
finish
to
this
die.
up. It's
He
3. I gotta
predicted
feed the
it
kitties.
with alarming
But I'm almost
accuracy,
done.
saying to his friend
Then I'm gonna
Sammy
turn
on
on
the
the ducks.
17th that he knew he would not last the night. What are the chances of an otherwise fit, healthy, and mentally stable young man dying of natural causes after a week of saying to friends that he feared for his life? One has to wonder whether there is more to this than meets the eye. Whatever happened during that week back in April of 1991, Chris truly believed that he was being haunted and ultimately hunted by something utterly sinister and horrific enough to literally scare him to death. After days of being tormented and tortured at the hands of who
That's
knows
fine.
what,
Go rest.
he finally succumbed to his fears and left behind a tantalizing mystery,
Hope you don't have
which will
nightmares.
probably never be solved. You may be wondering why the police never followed up on the identity of the woman who supposedly put this curse on him, but his death was never seen as suspicious, and so it did not warrant that kind of investigation. Besides, Chris took her name with him to the grave. Whether he died of a terrifying curse, or whether it was simply all in his head, this case is no less heartbreaking for those who were close to Chris, and we can only hope that he rests in peace.
She'll be fine.
Bedtime stories.
You know, I feel to make Mr. Nightmare's videos a lot better. What? Oh,
Shortly after moving into a new home in the summer of
you know, I
1988,
feel.
single mother
Oh,
of two,
yeah.
Jackie Hernandez,
But
began to
here's the
experience a
thing.
horrific and relentless
One
haunting
Halloween,
from a seemingly restless entity.
I emailed him
Was
to
it all
see
a
if it would be
hoax?
okay if I played his
Or was there
content
any
while I was
truth to the
streaming.
infamous
Never
San
heard back
Pedro
from him.
haunting?
Out of respect, I just don't do it. He didn't give me a yes, so I don't want to step on any toes because I like his stuff. Yeah, maybe.
Ghost stories have been told all over the world since time immemorial. From haunted buildings, roads and forests, to cars and even
I
people.
think so. It sounds familiar.
There is no shortage of such tales to tell on a cold, dark night, whilst sat around an open campfire. Maybe you believe them, maybe you don't. But regardless of your thoughts on the matter, whether real or imagined, these stories are no less chilling. According to paranormal research,
Really?
a
You gotta
staggering
give me the link.
50% of us have experienced or will experience something out of the ordinary during
I
our
want to see
lifetimes.
that.
Indeed, it does appear that some people are more receptive to these occurrences than others, and there are reports to suggest that paranormal activity is actually drawn to certain individuals. This at least seemed to be the case for 23-year-old Jackie Hernandez when she moved into the rented bungalow at 593 West 11th Street, San Pedro, California, in November 1988. As a single mother working multiple jobs, studying part-time in order to advance her career, and going through the stress of moving into a new home, all whilst being pregnant with a second child and negotiating a messy divorce, Jackie was certainly enduring a most difficult period in her life. And unfortunately for her, things were about to get a whole lot worse. From the moment she moved into the bungalow, a home much like any other on West 11th Street, Jackie described to friends and neighbours how she felt as if she was constantly being watched by someone or something that was always at her back. However, when she turned around, there was never anyone there. Over the following months, this feeling only intensified, and whatever presence she felt was in the household with her would gradually make itself known. The activity started small and was, for the most part, benign in nature. An object would go missing here or there, and then reappear elsewhere in the house. There would be the odd unexplained knock or bang, and on occasion, a strange smell. These things were not too bothersome for Jackie, and she would determine that, in many cases, her mind was simply playing tricks on her. However, one evening she was sitting watching television, when out the corner of her eye, she saw a pencil holder that was placed on a table in the hall mysteriously levitate and then fly towards her, as if thrown by an invisible hand. The experience frightened her so much that she grabbed her young son, left the house and ran to her neighbours in a panic. She even called the police, who, it has to be said, were less than impressed with her story. Nevertheless, Jackie knew the truth of the matter. More importantly, she also knew that she had to go back into the house that night and sleep in her own bed, in the knowledge that she was not entirely alone.
Nah, that's when you go get a hotel room.
If her friends had been skeptical of this experience, it would not be long before they too would have their own stories to share.
Yeah, you have permission.
According to her neighbour, Susan Castaneda, whilst having dinner together, the two of them heard a painting fall from where it hung in a separate room. When they went to investigate, it had inexplicably moved 5 feet from where it originally hung. On another occasion, Susan also claimed to have seen a lamp float 7 feet across a room before dropping to the floor right in front of her.
Alright, guys.
Since her friends were
What do
also
you think?
witnessing the strange activity, Jackie was relieved to know
I
that
think it
whatever
turned
she
out.
was experiencing was indeed real, and that she was not losing her mind. This led to a brief period of reassurance, but unfortunately,
Out of the weird
following the
colors
birth
I
of
got
her second
forced to
child,
pick,
Samantha, this activity
I think it
did
turned
not
out pretty
slow
decent.
down. In fact, it only escalated and grew more and more distressing by the day.
It looks adorable.
One evening,
Yeah.
whilst doing chores around the house, Jackie discovered a blood-like ooze seeping from the cracks in the ceiling and running down the kitchen walls. In order to find the source of the leak, she
Alright.
climbed on top of her washing machine to reach the
Unfortunately,
attic opening, and as she
we're not gonna
hesitantly
be able to
poked her
finish
head
this
through the hatch
story,
into the darkness,
So we'll save it
she
for
turned
next
to
time.
face a most horrifying sight. Floating in the corner and staring straight at her was the severed head of a menacing old man.
And that's where we're going to leave it. Alright, folks. I got to go feed the cats and get some dinner. So I'm going to turn on some plastic ducks. And they're going to float around and entertain everyone. Hang on. I'm trying to clean up my area. And then that's going to go for a bit. And when I come back, we're probably going to play some Crime Scene Cleaner if you're still around. And then I will play that for a determined amount of time. Are we going to get a face reveal? Never. This is my face. I'm a gargoyle. What do you want from me? Rawr! Alright. Kill the art. There we go.